Quinn Merrick's boot slammed into Titan's ribs. The German Shepherd, 9 years old, 43, IEDs detected 18 lives saved, yelped and collapsed onto the cracked pavement of Pinewood's main street. Two men in expensive boots laughed. The sound echoed off the empty storefronts like broken glass. They didn't know Titan was a war dog, didn't know his handler was a Navy SEAL. And they definitely didn't know Ethan Cole was watching from across the street, one hand frozen on the door of Stella's Cafe, the other clenched into a fist that remembered how to break bones. Before we continue, hit subscribe right now. What Ethan does next will restore your faith in justice, but only if you watch until the end. Comment where you were watching from. Quinn stepped back, admiring his work like an artist evaluating a canvas. He was 29 but carried himself with the arrogance of inherited wealth. Designer jeans, Italian leather jacket, hair styled with product that cost more than most people in Pinewood made in a week. Titan tried to stand, his legs shook. The old injury in his right hind leg, shrapnel from Fallujah 2019, made him stumble. But he kept trying, because that's what war dogs do. They don't quit. Quinn's two companions, both in their 30s, both built like men who spent money on gym memberships they didn't need, moved closer. The taller one, face hidden behind Ray-Bans despite the overcast sky, kicked a rock toward Titan. It skittered across the pavement and struck the dog's shoulder. Titan flinched but didn't retreat. His amber eyes stayed locked on Quinn. Assessing, calculating. Even now, even broken, the dog was still on duty. Ethan crossed the street. His boots made no sound. Years of moving through hostile territory had taught him how to become a ghost when necessary. He was 38, lean rather than bulky, with the kind of strength built from carrying wounded teammates through desert heat and mountain cold. Dark hair cropped military short, a neat beard that couldn't quite hide the scar running along his right jawline, souvenir from a Taliban fighter who'd gotten too close. He wore jeans and a faded Carhartt jacket, no logos, no statements, nothing that drew attention. That was intentional. Ethan Cole had spent 2 years trying to disappear into the Wyoming mountains, trying to forget the things he'd done and seen, trying to silence the screams that still woke him at 3 in the morning. But watching Quinn Merrick hurt his dog brought everything back into sharp, terrible focus. Titan saw Ethan first. The dog's ears perked up. His tail gave one weak thump against the pavement. That small gesture, that moment of recognition and relief, made something crack inside Ethan's chest. Quinn noticed Ethan's approach and turned, smile widening. Up close, his face had the smooth, unblemished quality of someone who'd never been punched, never faced real consequences, never learned that actions carried weight. "This your mutt," Quinn's voice carried the lazy confidence of a man used to getting his way. "Sorry about that. Thought it was a stray." Ethan didn't respond. He knelt beside Titan, hands moving with practiced efficiency over the dog's body, checking for breaks, assessing damage. The dog's breathing was shallow but steady. Blood trickled from his mouth, probably bit his tongue when he fell. The ribs felt intact, but there would be bruising. Bad bruising. "Hey, I'm talking to you." Quinn stepped closer. His cologne was expensive and overwhelming. "Tell you what, sell me that worthless piece of land you're squatting on, and I'll pay the vet bill. How's that sound?" Ethan's hands stilled on Titan's fur. The dog was trembling now, small shakes running through his body, not from pain, from restraint. Titan knew what was happening, knew these men were threats. Every instinct screamed at him to attack, to defend, to fight. But he stayed down because Ethan was here, and Ethan would handle it. That trust, absolute and unearned and freely given, was almost more than Ethan could bear. He stood slowly. When he met Quinn's eyes, something in his expression made the younger man take half a step back. Just half. Just enough to show he'd recognized danger before his pride caught up and locked his feet in place. "Step away from my dog." Ethan's voice was quiet, controlled. The kind of quiet that made smart people nervous. Quinn wasn't smart. He laughed. Actually laughed. Then he drew his foot back and kicked Titan again. Not as hard as the first time, just hard enough to make his point. Hard enough to show he wasn't afraid. The world narrowed. Ethan's vision tunneled. His pulse slowed. Training took over target assessment, threat evaluation, optimal strike points. Quinn's throat. The gap between his ribs. The vulnerable spot behind his knee. 3 moves. Maybe 4. The fight would be over before Quinn's companions could react. Ethan's right hand curled into a fist. Muscle memory flooded through him, the weight of a knife, the kick of a rifle, the sick crunch of a man's orbital bone breaking under his knuckles. Then Titan whimpered. The sound cut through everything. Ethan's hands opened. He breathed out slowly through his nose. The red haze cleared. He knelt again, gathered Titan carefully into his arms. The dog was heavy, 80 pounds of muscle and loyalty and pain, but Ethan lifted him like he weighed nothing. Titan's head rested against Ethan's chest. His tail, usually so proud and upright, hung limp. Quinn watched this with obvious amusement. He pulled a business card from his wallet, thick stock embossed lettering, and let it flutter to the ground. 10 days, Cole. He knew Ethan's name. Of course he did. Then I take what's mine. He turned and walked toward a black Mercedes SUV parked illegally in front of the cafe. His companions followed still, laughing, still talking voices carrying in the cold mountain air. Ethan stood there holding his dog, watching them drive away. His jaw ached from clenching it. His hands ached from not using them. Around him, Pinewood watched through windows and half-closed doors. No one came out. No one asked if he needed help. They'd learned over the past 4 years that getting involved in Merrick business meant becoming Merrick business. Fear had trained them well. Ethan carried Titan to his truck, a 2008 Ford F-150 with rust on the wheel wells and a crack in the windshield. He laid the dog gently on the passenger seat, then stood for a moment with his hand on Titan's head, just breathing. The dog looked up at him with those amber eyes. No accusation there. No blame. Just trust. Still trust. Always trust. I know, buddy, Ethan whispered. I know. He climbed behind the wheel and started driving. The nearest vet was Dr. Catherine Walsh, 30 miles east in the next valley over. Ethan pushed the speedometer to 70 on roads that suggested 50. The truck rattled. Titan lay still, occasionally lifting his head to look at Ethan, then settling back down. The sun was setting behind the Rockies, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of orange and purple that would have been beautiful if Ethan had been capable of noticing. He wasn't. His mind was locked on the sound of boot against ribs, the sight of Titan falling the way Quinn had smiled. Dr. Walsh's clinic sat at the end of a gravel road, a small building with peeling paint and a hand-carved wooden sign. Ethan had been here twice before, once when he first arrived in Wyoming with Titan just for a checkup, and once 6 months ago when the dog had gotten into a porcupine. Catherine knew them, knew their story, or at least as much of it as Ethan had been willing to share. It was past 7 when Ethan pulled up. The clinic was dark. He carried Titan to the door anyway and knocked. Lights flickered on inside. A moment later, Catherine appeared, late 50s, silver-streaked brown hair, pulled back in a practical ponytail, wire-rimmed glasses sliding down her nose. She took one look at Titan and unlocked the door. Exam room 2, she said. No questions. Not yet. Ethan laid Titan on the steel table. The dog's breathing had gotten worse during the drive. Shallower. Faster. Catherine's hands moved over him with the same efficiency Ethan had used earlier, but with decades more experience. She was quiet for a long time. Ethan stood against the wall, arms crossed, watching. Waiting. Finally, Catherine straightened. She pulled off her examination gloves with 2 sharp snaps. 2 broken ribs, likely internal bruising, possible damage to his spleen. Her voice was clinical, but her eyes were angry. He needs surgery tonight. And even then, she didn't finish. Didn't need to. Cost, Ethan asked. $4,200. Ethan pulled out his wallet. Inside were 3 bills, 200s and 420s. $340. That was it. That was everything he had until next week's paycheck from the odd jobs he picked up around Pinewood. Catherine watched him count it twice, as if the numbers might change. I can do payments, Ethan said quietly. She studied him for a long moment. Behind her glasses, her eyes were sad. She'd been a vet in rural Wyoming for 30 years. She'd had this conversation before. Too many times before. How much can you put down? $340. Catherine sighed, pulled off her glasses, rubbed the bridge of her nose. When she looked at Ethan again, something in her expression had shifted. Your dog is a war hero, Mr. Cole. I'm not going to let him die over money. She gestured toward the waiting room. Go sit down. This is going to take a while. Ethan opened his mouth to thank her, to say something, but the words tangled in his throat, so he just nodded and walked out. The waiting room had 4 plastic chairs and a table covered in outdated magazines. Ethan didn't sit. He stood by the window staring out at darkness, seeing nothing. His mind went where it always went when he had nothing to distract it. Back. Always back. Iraq 2019, the outskirts of Fallujah. Heat that made your brain feel like it was cooking inside your skull. Dust so thick you could taste it hours after you'd left the field. Ethan's team, 7 SEALs, 3 Iraqi interpreters and Titan, moving through a residential neighborhood that intelligence said was clear. Intelligence was wrong. Intelligence was often wrong. They'd been there to extract a high-value target. ended up in a firefight instead. Bullets punching through walls, kicking up dirt, the air filled with cordite and screaming. Titan had been 20 feet ahead, checking doorways the way he'd been trained. Ethan saw the dog stop. Sit. The signal that meant explosives detected. Ethan raised his fist. The team halted. They found the IED exactly where Titan indicated, 50 pounds of homemade explosives wired to a pressure plate hidden under a blanket in a doorway they would have walked through in another 30 seconds. If Titan hadn't caught it, if they'd kept moving, the explosion would have killed or maimed every man in the squad. Instead, they called it in. Explosive ordnance disposal came and dismantled it. They completed the mission. Everyone went home. Ethan had knelt in the dirt afterward while the rest of the team packed up and held Titan's face in both hands. "Good boy," he'd said. "You saved us. Again." Titan had licked his face, tail wagging, happy just to have done his job. That was the 17th time the dog had found an IED before it could kill someone. 17 times he'd put his nose close to death and said, "Here. Right here. Be careful." And today in a nothing town in Wyoming, that same dog had been kicked by a spoiled child playing at being a man. The fury that rose in Ethan was old and familiar and dangerous. He'd learned to control it in the SEALs, learned that anger made you sloppy, made you dead, but control wasn't the same as absence. The anger was always there, just beneath the surface, waiting for an excuse. He forced his breathing to slow, counted backwards from 20. Did the exercises the VA therapist had taught him before he'd stopped going to therapy. It almost worked. The surgery took 3 hours and 40 minutes. Ethan knew because he watched every minute tick by on the wall clock. He didn't sit, didn't pace, just stood by the window perfectly still, while his mind ran through scenarios he'd promised himself he'd never think about again. At 10:47 p.m., Catherine emerged. She looked exhausted. There was blood on her scrubs. "He's stable," she said. "Strong heartbeat, breathing steady. He'll need 2 weeks of complete rest, but he should make a full recovery." The relief that hit Ethan was physical. His knees actually weakened. He put one hand against the wall to steady himself. "Can I see him?" Catherine nodded and led him to the recovery room. Titan lay on a padded table, still unconscious from the anesthesia. His breathing was slow and even. Someone Catherine probably had cleaned the blood from his muzzle. Ethan walked over and rested his hand on the dog's head. The fur was warm, alive. "Thank you," he managed to say. Catherine stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "You know who did this?" "Yes." "Are you going to do something stupid about it?" Ethan didn't answer. After a moment, Catherine sighed. "Quinn Merrick has done this before. Not to war dogs, but to other animals. Pets, strays, whatever crosses his path when he's in the mood." She paused. "His father owns half this county. Sheriff won't touch them. Town council won't touch them. They're untouchable, Mr. Cole." "Nobody's untouchable," Ethan said quietly. Catherine studied him, really looked at him, saw the scars, the stillness, the controlled violence that lived behind his eyes. "No," she agreed. "I suppose they're not, but touching them has consequences. Ask Walter Brennan, ask the Johnsons, ask anyone who's tried to stand up to the Merricks in the last 4 years." She left him alone with Titan. Ethan pulled up a chair and sat. He'd spent countless nights like this in Iraq and Afghanistan, sitting beside wounded teammates waiting to see if they'd make it. Some had, some hadn't. He'd learned not to pray during those vigils. God, in his experience, didn't listen to men with blood on their hands. But he broke that rule tonight. Please, he thought, not him. Take anything else, but not him. Titan's ear twitched. His paw moved slightly, like he was running in his sleep, chasing something, or maybe running from something. Ethan stayed until dawn. When he finally left the clinic, the sun was rising over the mountains, turning the sky shades of pink and gold. It was beautiful. Ethan barely noticed. He drove back to Pinewood on autopilot, his mind elsewhere. The town was just waking up, shop owners unlocking doors, early commuters grabbing coffee at Stella's Cafe. Everything looked normal, peaceful. That was the lie of small towns. They looked safe, felt safe, until they didn't. Ethan's cabin sat 30 miles outside Pinewood proper, at the end of a dirt road that turned to mud every spring and ice every winter. It had belonged to his grandfather, a man Ethan had known for maybe 10 cumulative weeks, spread across his childhood, but who'd somehow left him the property when he died 3 years ago. The cabin was small, 2 rooms, 1 bathroom. A kitchen that was really just a corner with a stove and a sink. But it had a porch that looked out over a valley, and in the mornings you could watch elk graze in the meadow below. His grandfather had died here. Heart attack. Alone. No one found him for 3 days. Ethan tried not to think about that too much. He parked the truck and sat for a moment just looking at the place. Weathered wood, tin roof, windows that needed replacing. It wasn't much, but it was his. The only thing in the world that belonged to him that the Navy hadn't given him or taken away. And Quinn Merrick wanted it. Ethan climbed out of the truck and walked to the porch, sat on the steps. The morning air was cold enough to see his breath. Somewhere in the trees, a crow called out. Another answered. He should sleep. He'd been awake for over 24 hours. His body ached. His eyes burned. But he knew if he lay down, he'd just stare at the ceiling, seeing Quinn's boot connect with Titan's ribs over and over again. So instead, he sat and watched the sun climb higher and thought about what Catherine had said. Untouchable. Maybe, maybe not. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. This is Dr. Walsh. Titan is awake, asking for you. Well, not asking, but you know what I mean. Despite everything, Ethan smiled. He texted back, on my way. But first he went inside and opened the drawer beside his bed. Inside was a business card, thick stock, embossed lettering. The one Quinn had dropped on the street. Quinn Merrick, Chief Financial Officer, Merrick Development Corporation. And below that, in smaller text, building Wyoming's future. Ethan studied the card for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone and did something he'd been avoiding for 2 years. He Googled the Merrick name. What he found made his jaw tighten. Donovan Merrick, age 61, former state senator. Failed re-election 4 years ago amid corruption allegations that never quite stuck. Now CEO of Merrick Development Corporation, a company that had purchased over 15,000 acres in this part of Wyoming in the past 3 years. There were photos. Donovan in a suit shaking hands with the governor. Donovan breaking ground on luxury developments. Donovan accepting awards from business councils and chambers of commerce. He looked distinguished. Silver hair, warm smile, the kind of face you'd trust. The articles painted a different picture. Family displaced after mysterious fire destroys home sells land to Merrick Development weeks later. Local rancher drowns in suspicious accident, estate sells property to Merrick Corporation. Environmental groups protest Merrick Development's clear-cutting practices. Protests shut down by county sheriffs. 58 parcels of land, 58 families who'd lived in this valley for generations suddenly gone. Relocated, bought out, or worse. And now Donovan Merrick wanted parcel 59. Ethan's parcel. He kept reading. Found an article from 2 months ago. Merrick Development announces Alpine Summit Resort, $120 million. Luxury development set to transform rural Wyoming. The article included architectural renderings, a massive ski resort, hotels, condos, a golf course, all of it spread across the valley where Ethan's cabin sat. According to the article, groundbreaking was scheduled for 75 days from now. Investors from Canada, international partnerships. The governor himself was expected to attend the ceremony. Ethan zoomed in on the map that accompanied the article. His cabin sat right in the middle of the proposed development. Without his land, there was a gap, a hole. The project couldn't proceed as designed. He was the last piece they needed, and Quinn Merrick had just shown him exactly what they were willing to do to get it. Ethan set down his phone, sat very still, thinking. 10 days, Quinn had said. Ethan had fought in wars that were won or lost in less time than that. He stood up, walked to the closet in the corner of the bedroom. At the back, behind old coats and boxes of his grandfather's belongings he hadn't sorted through yet, was a footlocker. Military issue, secured with a combination lock. Ethan spun the dial. The lock clicked open. Inside were things he hadn't looked at since his discharge. Uniforms, medals he'd never displayed, photographs of men, some living, some dead, a folded American flag from a funeral he tried not to remember. And at the very bottom, wrapped in an oilcloth, something else. Ethan touched the cloth but didn't unwrap it. Not yet, maybe not ever. He closed the footlocker, locked it again, pushed it back into the darkness where it belonged. There were other ways to fight, better ways, legal ways. But as he drove back to Dr. Walsh's clinic to collect Titan, he couldn't shake the feeling that legal wasn't going to be enough. Not against men like the Merricks. Not in a town where money bought silence and fear bought compliance. He'd been naive to think he could hide here, that he could just exist quietly and the world would leave him alone. The world didn't work that way. It never had. Titan was sitting up when Ethan arrived, tail thumping weakly against the kennel floor. Dr. Walsh had him on pain medication and antibiotics. She gave Ethan careful instructions about recovery. Rest, no running, no stress. He's 9 years old, Mr. Cole, she said gently. His body isn't what it used to be. Another injury like this? You never did. She didn't finish, didn't need to. Ethan loaded Titan carefully into the truck. The dog settled on the passenger seat with a soft grunt. Ethan drove home slowly, avoiding potholes, taking curves gently. When they reached the cabin, he carried Titan inside and set him on the old couch, the only piece of furniture his grandfather had left behind. The dog immediately curled up nose to tail and closed his eyes. Ethan sat beside him, put his hand on Titan's back, felt the rise and fall of breathing, steady, strong, alive. "I won't let them hurt you again," he said quietly. "I promise." Titan's tail thumped once. That night, Ethan sat on the porch with a beer he didn't drink, watching darkness claim the valley. Somewhere out there, Quinn Merrick was probably celebrating, probably laughing with his friends about the nobody vet who just stood there and taken it. Let him laugh. Let him think he'd won. Ethan Cole had spent a decade learning how to be patient, how to watch and wait, how to choose his moment. Quinn Merrick had 10 days. He'd need every one of them. Because what was coming wasn't the quick, hot violence of a bar fight or a street brawl. What was coming was the slow, methodical dismantling that comes when you make an enemy of someone trained in warfare. Quinn had kicked a war dog. Now he was going to learn why that was a mistake. The beer grew warm in Ethan's hand. Stars emerged overhead, more than you could ever see in a city, painting the sky with light. An owl called from the trees. The wind carried the scent of pine and coming winter. And Ethan Cole began to plan. The morning came cold and unforgiving. Ethan woke on the couch beside Titan, his neck stiff from sleeping upright, his hand still resting on the dog's back. Titan was awake, watching him with those amber eyes that seemed to understand more than any animal should. "How you feeling, buddy?" Ethan asked softly. Titan's tail moved once, twice. The pain medication was doing its job. Ethan stood, stretched, and walked to the kitchen. Made coffee in the old percolator his grandfather had used. The cabin was cold. He'd let the fire die during the night, but he didn't mind. The cold helped him think. He needed to understand what he was up against, really understand it. While the coffee brewed, he pulled out his laptop and continued the research he'd started yesterday. The Merrick family had roots in Wyoming going back 4 generations. Ranchers originally, then oil, then real estate. Always adapting, always growing, always taking. Donovan Merrick's father had been a state representative. His grandfather had owned half the mineral rights in Carbon County. The family tree spread through local government business councils and charitable foundations like roots through poisoned soil. They were embedded, protected, untouchable, just like Catherine had said. But Ethan had learned in the SEALs that every fortress has weak points. Every enemy has vulnerabilities. You just had to look hard enough to find them. He was still looking when his phone rang. Unknown number. "This is Cole." "Mr. Cole, this is Garrett Hayes. We met briefly at the hardware store last month. I heard about what happened to your dog." Ethan remembered. Mid-50s, gray beard, quiet voice. They talked for maybe 5 minutes about woodworking while Ethan bought screws. "News travels fast," Ethan said. "It's a small town, smaller when bad things happen." A pause. "I live about 10 miles west of you, off Route 191. If you've got time today, I'd appreciate a conversation." "About what?" "About the Merricks. And what they don't want people like us to know." Ethan looked at Titan. The dog was sleeping again, breathing steady. "I'll be there in an hour." Garrett's place was larger than Ethan expected. Not a cabin, but a proper house, 2 stories well maintained. Behind it sat a building with a sign, Hayes Gun and Tackle. The shop was closed. It was Sunday, but smoke rose from the house's chimney. Garrett answered before Ethan could knock. He was tall, broad-shouldered, despite his age, with the kind of bearing that marked him as military even in civilian clothes. Hearing aids sat in both ears. His handshake was firm, but not aggressive, a greeting between equals. "Ethan Cole," Garrett said. "Thanks for coming." Inside the house was warm and lived in. Photos on the walls showed Garrett in uniform, younger, standing with other SEALs. Ethan recognized the SEAL Trident insignia. Recognized the look in those younger eyes. The look of men who'd seen things they'd never speak about. "You were Team 3, Ethan said, studying a photo from what looked like early Iraq. "Long time ago, Afghanistan and Iraq, 2003 to 2015. You tied me Team 5, Iraq and Afghanistan, got out 2 years back." Garrett nodded like this confirmed something he'd suspected. "Coffee, please." They sat at a kitchen table scarred with decades of use. Garrett poured 2 cups, pushed one across to Ethan, then sat heavily in a chair that creaked under his weight. "I'm going to be direct," Garrett said. The Merricks have been buying up this valley for 4 years. Started slow, friendly offers, fair prices. Then the offers got less friendly, the prices got less fair, and the people who said no started having accidents. What kind of accidents? Walter Brennan, you'll meet him soon, probably had a dog, yellow Labrador named Duke, 12 years old. Someone poisoned it with antifreeze. Garrett's jaw tightened. Week later, Merrick offered to buy Walter's land. Walter sold. Johnson family had a barn fire, lost everything, sold 2 weeks after. Martinez family's well got contaminated, sold. Patterson's truck got run off the road while he was driving home from church. He was hospitalized for a month. His wife sold the ranch while he was recovering. He died 3 weeks after getting home. Ethan listened without interrupting, his coffee growing cold in his hands. I'm telling you this, Garrett continued, because you need to know what you're dealing with. Donovan Merrick isn't just rich, he's patient, methodical. He doesn't do his own dirty work, but it gets done. Always gets done. And Sheriff Caldwell, he shook his head. Sheriff's a good man who made bad choices. He takes Merrick money to look the other way. Why are you still here? Garrett smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Stubbornness, and the fact that I have more lawyers than most folks around here can afford. Merrick offered me $450,000 for land worth maybe half that. I said no. 2 weeks later, someone broke into my shop during the night, took $35,000 in inventory. Guns, ammo, expensive fishing gear. Sheriff Caldwell investigated for about 10 minutes, filed a report, never followed up. And the sheriff works for Merrick. The sheriff gets paid by the county, but the county commissioners get elected with Merrick money. The mayor's campaign was funded by Merrick. The town council president's daughter works for Merrick Development. Garrett took a long drink of coffee. You see how it works? Ethan saw. 3 days ago, Garrett said, Merrick raised his offer to $500,000. I said no again. So now I'm waiting to see what accident finds me next. He met Ethan's eyes. I'm telling you all this because you kicked the hornet's nest yesterday. By not selling, by not bending, by standing there and taking it without breaking, you made yourself a problem. And the Merricks solve problems. I'm not selling, Ethan said quietly. I know, I saw how you looked at that dog, same way I looked at my teammates back in the day. Garrett stood, walked to a drawer, pulled out a USB drive, set it on the table between them. This is 6 months of documentation, photos of damaged property, recordings of veiled threats I've received, property records showing suspicious salespeople selling for a fraction of value right after accidents, transaction records showing cash payments from Merrick to county officials. I've been building a case, but I don't have the reach to do anything with it. Local law won't touch it. State police say it's not their jurisdiction. FBI doesn't care about small-town real estate disputes. He pushed the USB across the table. But if something happens to me, Garrett said, I want someone to know the truth. Someone who understands that sometimes you have to fight even when the odds are bad. Someone who won't quit when things get hard. Ethan picked up the USB, felt its weight in his palm. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just stay alive long enough to use it. And Cole, Garrett's voice dropped. They will come at you again. Harder this time. Be ready. They talked for another hour. Garrett had been part of SEAL Team 3 during the early days of Iraq. He'd seen things, done things, carried the same weight Ethan carried. They didn't talk about those things directly. Men like them rarely did, but the understanding was there, unspoken and complete. Two warriors recognizing each other across a kitchen table in the middle of nowhere, Wyoming. When Ethan finally left, the sun was high and cold. He drove back toward Pinewood Mine, working through what Garrett had told him. The Merricks had a system, a pattern, pressure, then escalation, then resolution. They'd pressured Ethan with Quinn's visit and the offer to buy. The attack on Titan was escalation. Resolution would come next. And resolution in the Merrick playbook meant getting what they wanted or destroying what stood in their way. He needed to be ready. Pinewood's main street was quiet for a Sunday. A few cars parked outside the diner. A couple walking their dog past the post office. Normal small-town America. If you didn't know what was happening beneath the surface, you'd think it was the most peaceful place on earth. Ethan pulled into the parking lot of Pinewood Cafe. The open sign glowed in the window. Through the glass, he could see Stella behind the counter, wiping down tables with the methodical efficiency of someone who'd been doing the same job for decades. He'd been coming here for 2 years ever since he'd moved to the cabin. Always sat at the same booth in the back corner, always ordered the same thing, coffee black, and whatever Stella recommended for breakfast. They developed the kind of relationship small towns were built on: polite, distant, comfortable. She knew he was former military. He knew she was a widow raising a son alone. That was the extent of it. But after yesterday, distance felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. The bell above the door chimed when he entered. Stella looked up and something in her expression shifted. Recognition, concern, maybe fear. She was in her early 50s with blonde hair starting to gray and lines around her eyes that spoke of hard years and harder choices. She'd lost her husband 8 years ago in a mining accident up near Gillette, raised her son alone, kept the cafe running through recessions and road construction and everything else that killed small businesses in places like Pinewood. Ethan, she said, her voice softer than usual. How's Titan recovering? Dr. Walsh says he'll be okay. Relief crossed her face like a shadow lifting. I'm glad. I heard what happened. I'm so sorry. The other customer in the cafe, an older man Ethan didn't recognize, paid his bill and left the bell, chiming again. Suddenly, the cafe was empty except for the two of them. Stella poured Ethan coffee without asking, brought it to his usual booth, then after a moment's hesitation, sat down across from him. This had never happened before. In 2 years of coming here, Stella had never sat with him. You need to know something, she said quietly, her hands wrapped around her own coffee cup like she needed the warmth. Quinn Merrick was here yesterday after what happened. He was bragging about it to his friends, about how the dumb vet just stood there, how easy it's going to be to take your land, how you're weak. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, just waited. He's done this before, Stella continued, not just to you, to lots of people. My son Owen, he's 17 now. Quinn and his friends beat him up last year outside the school. It was after a football game. Owen stood up for a freshman kid who Quinn was picking on. They followed Owen to the parking lot and her voice broke. She took a breath, steadied herself. Broke his jaw, 8 stitches in his face. He couldn't eat solid food for 6 weeks. Did you report it? I went to Sheriff Caldwell that same night. He took a report, wrote everything down, said he'd investigate. She laughed bitterly. Nothing happened. No charges, no consequences. 3 days later, Quinn showed up here at the cafe. Sat right where you're sitting now. Said if I wanted to keep my business, I needed to pay him $500 a month. Protection money, he called it. Said if I didn't, accidents happen. Grease fires, health violations, bad online reviews. And you paid. What choice did I have? I've got a son to raise, a business to run. This cafe is all I have. I can't afford to fight people with lawyers and money and connections. She looked at him directly, her eyes wet but her voice steady. But you can. What makes you think that? Because you're not from here. You don't have roots that can be ripped up. You've got skills most people don't have. Training. Experience, she paused. And because I saw your face yesterday when you were holding Titan. You weren't scared, you were calculating, planning. You looked like a soldier deciding how to win a war. She was more observant than he'd given her credit for. If you're planning something, Stella said, you should know you're not alone. There are others, people who are tired of being afraid, people who would stand with you if someone stood up first. We just need someone brave enough to take that first step. That's how people get hurt. People are already hurt, Ethan. We're just waiting for it to get bad enough that we can't ignore it anymore. Waiting for someone to show us it's possible to fight back. She stood up, started to walk away, then turned back. Owen gets off school tomorrow at 3. He can tell you things I can't, things the kids see and hear that adults don't notice, things that might help. Before Ethan could respond, the door opened. A young man walked in, 17, thin, with nervous eyes and a scar along his jawline that was still pink and healing. Owen Martinez. He looked at his mother, then at Ethan, then quickly away. Stella touched Ethan's shoulder once briefly, then went back behind the counter. The moment of vulnerability was over. The mask was back up. Ethan sat alone with his coffee thinking. He'd come to Wyoming to escape, to find peace, to stop being the person the Navy had trained him to be. But peace, he was learning, wasn't something you found lying around. It was something you built. And sometimes building it required tearing down what came before. His phone buzzed, a text from a number he didn't recognize. Mr. Cole, this is Walter Brennan. Garrett Hayes gave me your number. Can we talk? It's about my dog, Duke, and about what the Merricks really are. Ethan typed back where and when. The response came immediately. My place, 2847 County Road 35. Anytime today works. 20 minutes later, Ethan was pulling up to a small ranch 15 miles east of town. The house was old but maintained with obvious care. A tire swing hung from an oak tree in the front yard. Flower beds dormant for winter lined the walkway with military precision. Walter Brennan answered the door before Ethan reached it. He was 74 but carried himself like a much younger man. White hair cut short, thick glasses that magnified his eyes, a slight stoop to his shoulders that spoke of decades of hard physical labor. "Mr. Cole, thank you for coming." His voice was rough, like he'd spent years shouting over machinery. "Please come in." The inside of the house was neat and sparse. Photos on the walls showed a younger Walter in military fatigues, desert camouflage, the tan and brown pattern of the first Gulf War. "You served," Ethan said. 1991, Gulf War, drove supply trucks. Wasn't glamorous like you SEAL boys, but it was necessary work. Walter gestured to a worn armchair. "Can I get you anything? Coffee, water?" "I'm fine, thank you." They sat. Walter's hands trembled slightly as he folded them in his lap, age or emotion Ethan couldn't tell. "Garrett told me you're one of the good ones," Walter said. "Said you've got integrity. Said you won't bend when pressure comes." He took a deep breath. "I need to tell you what happened to Duke, and I need to tell you why I'm a coward." Duke had been Walter's dog for 12 years, a yellow Labrador, arthritic, half-blind from cataracts, the kind of dog that spent his days sleeping in sunbeams and his nights pressed against his owner's side, providing warmth and company to a man who lived alone. A year ago, Walter had received an offer from Merrick Development, $300,000 for his 80 acres. Walter had said no. The land had been in his family since his father bought it in 1952. His mother had planted the oak tree out front when Walter was born. His wife, dead now for 15 years, was buried in a small plot on the hill overlooking the meadow. 2 weeks after he refused the offer, Duke got sick. Started with vomiting. Walter said, his voice breaking despite the year that had passed. Then seizures. I rushed him to Dr. Walsh. She did everything she could, blood tests, amp fluids. But Duke died on her operating table at 2 in the morning. Walter's hands clenched into fists. Catherine said it was poison, antifreeze most likely. Someone had put it in something sweet, probably mixed with meat, and left it where Duke would find it. She said he must have eaten it hours before I noticed he was sick. By the time I got him to her, his kidneys were already failing. Walter had called Sheriff Caldwell. The sheriff had come out the next morning, looked around the property for 20 minutes, taken some photos, filed a report. Nothing happened. No investigation. No follow-up. The report disappeared into whatever black hole consumed reports that involved the Merrick family. 3 days after Duke died, Donovan Merrick himself had visited. Not Quinn, the father. He'd arrived in a black town car wearing a suit that probably cost more than Walter's monthly pension. Offered condolences about the dog, said what a shame it was, then raised his offer to $350,000. Walter had sold the next day. I told myself it was just a coincidence, Walter said, tears running down his weathered face now. That Duke was old, that maybe he got into something on his own, that maybe I was being paranoid. But I knew. Deep down in my gut, I knew they'd killed my dog because I said no. He looked at Ethan with eyes full of shame and rage and grief. I let them murder Duke, and then I gave them what they wanted. I took their blood money and I moved into this smaller place, and I've hated myself every single day since. His voice dropped to a whisper. I was a soldier. I drove through a war zone. I should have fought, but I was scared. I was tired. I was alone. So I sold my soul for $350,000. It's not your fault, Ethan said quietly. Isn't it? I had a choice. I could have fought, could have gone to the state police, the FBI, the newspapers, could have done something, but I didn't. I let them win. Walter stood up, walked to a desk in the corner, pulled out an envelope. When Garrett told me about Titan, about what Quinn did to him, I knew I had to do something. I can't bring Duke back, but maybe I can help you make sure they don't do this to anyone else. He handed the envelope to Ethan. Inside was a check for $10,000. This is my VA disability back pay from a claim I won last year. I was saving it for, well, it doesn't matter what for. Everything I was saving it for is gone, but you're still fighting. Your dog is still alive. Take this. Use it for Titan's vet bills. Use it for whatever you need to stop these people. Ethan stared at the check. $10,000. More money than Walter probably had in the world. I can't take this. Yes, you can. Because I'm not giving it to you. I'm giving it to the fight. I'm paying the price I should have paid a year ago when I had the chance. Walter's voice was firm now, steady. Please let me do this one thing right. Let me help you do what I couldn't. Ethan took the check, folded it carefully, put it in his wallet. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me. Just win. Beat them. make them pay for Duke and for Titan and for everyone else they've hurt. Walter sat back down. And there's something else. I've been watching them, keeping records. I know it's probably useless, but I couldn't just sit here doing nothing. He gave Ethan a folder thick with papers, property records, newspaper clippings about accidents and sales, a handwritten timeline of Merrick Development's land acquisitions, photos of damaged property, names and dates and dollar amounts. It was the work of a man who'd spent a year gathering evidence for a case he thought no one would ever prosecute. The work of someone trying to make amends the only way he knew how. They talked for another hour. Walter knew things, had observed patterns, had noticed details that might not mean anything individually, but together painted a damning picture. By the time Ethan left, the sun was setting and his truck was loaded with evidence from two different sources, Garrett's USB and Walter's folder. He drove back to the cabin, slowly, his mind assembling pieces of a puzzle. The Merricks weren't just bullies. They were running a sophisticated criminal enterprise disguised as legitimate business. And they'd gotten away with it because they'd isolated their victims, made each one think they were alone, made resistance seem impossible. But what if the victims weren't alone anymore? What if someone connected them? What if someone showed them that together they had power? Titan was awake when Ethan got home, tail thumping weakly against the couch cushions. Ethan sat beside him, scratched behind his ears, and said, "We might be in over our heads, buddy." Titan licked his hand. The message was clear. "Doesn't matter, we're in it together." That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table with his laptop going through everything Garrett and Walter had given him. 6 months of Garrett's meticulous documentation. A year of Walter's grief-driven investigation. Patterns emerged, methods repeated. A playbook that the Merricks had used over and over because it worked. Until now. At 2 in the morning, Ethan was still working when headlights swept across his windows. He stood quietly. Titan raised his head, ears forward despite the pain medication dulling his senses. Ethan moved to the window, staying to the side where he couldn't be seen. A truck was approaching up the access road. Not speeding, not trying to hide, just driving slowly toward his cabin with deliberate intent. His hand moved instinctively toward his waistband, then stopped. He didn't carry anymore. Hadn't in 2 years. That was part of the deal he'd made with himself when he'd left the teams. No more weapons, no more violence, no more being the person the Navy had created. But old habits die hard. The truck stopped 50 yards from the cabin. Doors opened. 4 men got out, silhouetted against their own headlights. Ethan couldn't see faces, but he could see builds, shapes. The way they moved with false confidence, the swagger of people used to intimidating others, not used to meeting real resistance. They weren't here to talk. The crowbars and bats they carried made that clear. Ethan's training kicked in immediately. Assess, plan, execute. 4 targets. Unknown armament beyond the visible weapons, possible firearms. High ground advantage, he was inside, elevated with the bottleneck of the door. Lighting disadvantage for attackers. Multiple escape routes if needed. He could handle 4. He'd handled worse odds in Kandahar and Fallujah and a dozen other places whose names he tried not to remember. But Titan couldn't run. The dog was barely 2 days out of surgery, and Ethan could not leave him. The men approached the cabin. One of them carried something along a baseball bat or metal pipe. Another had the crowbar raised like a club. They weren't hiding their intentions. This was meant to be a message, a lesson. Ethan backed away from the window, moved to where Titan lay on the couch. The dog was trying to stand now, instinct overriding pain and medication. "Stay down," Ethan whispered, pressing gently on Titan's shoulder. "I've got this. I need you to stay." Titan whined but settled back. Ethan went to the closet, pulled out his grandfather's Remington 870 12-gauge pump-action shotgun. He'd cleaned it when he first moved in, more from habit than necessity. It was loaded with birdshot, enough to hurt at close range, not enough to kill at any real distance. Enough to send a message without crossing lines Ethan had promised himself he wouldn't cross again. The men were at the porch now, heavy footsteps on wooden boards, low voices anticipatory and cruel. Then the first blow, something heavy against the door. The wood shuddered but held his grandfather had built well. Another blow. The frame splintered around the lock. Ethan chambered around. The sound was unmistakable in the quiet cabin, a sound every man who'd ever handled a shotgun recognized and respected. The metallic chunk that said, "Things just got serious." The pounding stopped. Silence. Then voices outside conferring, trying to decide if they'd heard what they thought they'd heard. "We know you're in there, Cole," one of them called out. "Come out and this goes easy. We're just here to deliver a message from Mr. Merrick." Ethan didn't respond. He positioned himself at an angle to the door where he'd have clear sight lines if they came through, where he could control the engagement, where training and experience gave him every advantage. "Your dog's already half dead," another voice shouted, younger, crueler. "You want to join him? Keep playing tough guy." Something inside Ethan went very cold, very still. The part of him that had operated in war zones, that had made split-second life-and-death decisions, that had killed when necessary and lived with it after that part woke up after 2 years of forced sleep. He moved to the door, threw it open. The four men stood on his porch silhouetted by moonlight. All wore dark clothes. 3 wore ski masks. The fourth, the one with the crowbar, had his face exposed, mid-30s, scar across his nose. The kind of face that had been in fights before and won most of them. Until now. Ethan didn't point the shotgun at them, didn't need to, just held it casually across his body finger alongside the trigger guard barrel aimed at the porch floor between them. The threat was implicit, undeniable. "You've got 3 seconds to get off my property," Ethan said quietly. The scarred man laughed. "For what you're going to shoot, that'll land you in prison faster than—" Ethan raised the shotgun and fired into the air above their heads. The blast was deafening in the mountain silence. Birds exploded from nearby trees in panic and flight. The men stumbled backward, hands instinctively covering their ears, eyes wide with shock. Ethan chambered another round. The chunk-chunk sound cut through the ringing silence like a blade. 2 seconds, he said. They ran, stumbled down the porch steps, tripping over each other in their haste, scrambled for their truck. Doors slammed, engine roared to life. Taillights disappeared down the access road faster than they'd arrived. Ethan stood on his porch, shotgun lowered, now breathing steadily. His heart rate hadn't elevated above 70 beats per minute. That worried him more than the attack itself. He should have been afraid, should have felt adrenaline, should have felt something. Instead, he felt nothing. Just the cold professional assessment of threat neutralized. Target eliminated, mission accomplished. He was slipping back, becoming what he'd been, what he'd promised himself he'd never be again. Behind him, Titan whimpered. Ethan turned. The dog had dragged himself halfway across the living room, trying to reach the door, trying to help. His stitches were intact. Dr. Walsh had done good work, but the effort had exhausted him. "It's okay, buddy," Ethan said, going to him. "I've got you. You don't have to fight anymore." But Titan's eyes were wide, not with pain, with something else. Fear, maybe, or recognition. The dog had seen something in Ethan's face just now. Recognized something. The part of Ethan that knew how to be cold, how to be dangerous, how to hurt people when necessary. Ethan realized his hands were shaking. Not from adrenaline, from rage. From the knowledge that if those men had come 30 seconds later, after Titan had made it to the door, after they'd threatened the dog directly, he didn't let himself finish the thought. He pulled out his phone, called Dr. Walsh. She answered on the third ring, voice thick with sleep. "Catherine, it's Ethan Cole. Men came to my cabin, threatened me. Titan tried to get up. I need to know if he hurt himself." There was a pause. Then in a voice now fully awake and professional, "Bring him in, now." The drive to the clinic took 20 minutes. Ethan carried Titan in his arms the whole way from cabin to truck, the dog's weight somehow heavier than before. Catherine was waiting in the parking lot when they arrived, still in her pajamas with a coat thrown over them. She examined Titan quickly, efficiently. Her face gave nothing away as her hands moved over the dog's body, checking vitals, examining the surgical site, assessing for new damage. Finally, "He's okay. Stitches held. No new injuries." But Ethan, she looked up at him, and her expression was harder than he'd ever seen it. "This dog just had major surgery 48 hours ago. He should be resting, recovering. Instead, he's trying to fight, trying to protect you. His body can't take much more stress." Where dogs don't retire the way they should. They keep serving until they can't anymore, until their hearts give out or their bodies break down. Titan will die protecting you if you let him. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. "What do you want me to do?" he asked quietly. "End this. Whatever's happening with the Merricks, end it fast. Or leave. Take Titan somewhere safe and start over somewhere else." She paused. "But I know you won't leave. Men like you never do, so end it. Before this dog pays the price for your war." Ethan brought Titan home an hour later. The dog was sedated again, sleeping peacefully. Ethan laid him on the couch and sat on the floor beside him, back against the cushions, hand on Titan's side, feeling the steady rise and fall of breathing. End it. How the Merricks had money, power, connections. They'd been doing this for years, refining their methods, corrupting the system. What could one man do against all that? His phone buzzed. Multiple texts coming in rapid succession. From Stella, Owen wants to talk to you tomorrow after school. Please, he's scared, but he says he has something important. From Garrett. Heard about tonight. Are you okay? Call me when you can. From the number that had texted earlier, Sheriff Caldwell. Mr. Cole, I know what happened at your cabin. We need to talk. Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. My house, not the station. This is important. Please come. Ethan stared at the messages. Something was happening. Something larger than just him and Titan in a piece of land. He pulled out Garrett's USB, plugged it into his laptop, started going through the files systematically. What he found made his blood run cold. Not just documentation of intimidation and property damage, not just recordings of threats, but spreadsheets, financial projections, construction timelines. And at the bottom of one file labeled Project Alpine Summit, Master Timeline, a single line that explained everything. Investor deadline 73 days from acquisition of Cole property. Failure to deliver complete parcel assembly will result in forfeiture of $40 million deposit and project cancellation. They needed his land desperately. The entire $120 million resort project hinged on having every piece of property. Without his cabin, there was a hole in the middle of their development. Without that final piece, their investors would walk. Donovan Merrick would lose everything. That's why Quinn had been so aggressive, why they'd escalated so quickly to attacking Titan, why men had come to his cabin tonight with weapons. They were running out of time, which meant they would get more desperate, more dangerous, more willing to cross lines. Ethan looked at Titan sleeping peacefully despite everything. The dog had spent 6 years in combat zones, had saved 18 lives by putting his nose close to explosives that could have killed him, had earned a quiet retirement somewhere safe. Instead, he'd been beaten, twice, because his handler owned something other people wanted. Ethan made a decision. He pulled out his phone and sent 4 texts. To Stella, I'll talk to Owen tomorrow, 3 p.m. Tell him to be ready. To Garrett, I'm okay, I need your help. Can we meet tomorrow at noon? To Sheriff Caldwell. What time tomorrow morning? To Walter. Thank you for the check. I'm using it to fight back. Are you with me all the way? The responses came quickly. Stella, thank you. He'll be ready. Be careful. Garrett, my place. Noon. I'll have everything ready. Caldwell, 6 a.m. Come alone. This is about more than just you now. Walter, all the way to the end. Whatever you need. I'm done being a coward. Ethan set down his phone. Outside, the first light of dawn was touching the peaks of the Rocky Mountains. A new day, a new phase of the fight. He'd tried peace, tried quiet, tried disappearing into the Wyoming wilderness and leaving his old life behind. The Merricks wouldn't let him. So he'd give them war. Not the kind with guns and explosives. The kind with evidence and witnesses and the slow, methodical destruction of everything they'd built. The kind where you turn communities against their oppressors. Where you expose corruption to light and let justice do what violence never could. He'd been trained to dismantle enemy networks, to identify weaknesses and exploit them. To win wars not through superior firepower, but through superior strategy. The Merricks had occupied his valley, his town, his life, and Ethan Cole was very, very good at resistance. Titan stirred, made a small sound in his sleep. Ethan scratched behind the dog's ears gently. We're going to fix this, he whispered. I promise. No more running, no more hiding. We end this the right way. Titan's tail thumped once against the couch cushion. Outside, the sun climbed higher over the valley. And somewhere in a mansion on the other side of the mountains, Quinn Merrick was probably sleeping soundly, believing he'd won. Believing fear and violence had broken another obstacle. He had no idea what was coming. None of them did. The victims were connecting. The evidence was assembling. The witnesses were finding courage. And at the center of it all stood a Navy SEAL who'd come home looking for peace but found a war instead. A war he intended to win. Not for glory, not for revenge, for an 8-year-old German shepherd who'd saved his life more times than he could count and deserved better than to spend his retirement bleeding on veterinary tables. For the people of Pinewood who'd lived in fear long enough. For Walter Brennan and his murdered dog, Duke. For Owen Martinez and his broken jaw. For everyone the Merricks had hurt and everyone they would hurt if someone didn't stop them. Ethan closed his laptop, checked on Titan one more time. The dog was sleeping peacefully now, pain medication and exhaustion finally winning out. Then Ethan did something he hadn't done since leaving the Navy. He opened the footlocker in his bedroom. Not to take anything out, just to remember. Inside were uniforms, medals, photos of teammates, some living, some dead, a folded flag from a funeral that still haunted his dreams. And beneath it all, wrapped carefully in an oilcloth, his seal trident. The gold insignia he'd earned through pain and blood and 26 months of training that broke most men who attempted it. He didn't take it out, didn't need to. Just seeing it was enough to remember who he'd been, what he was capable of, what he'd promised to protect. Ethan closed the footlocker, locked it, put it back in the closet. He wouldn't need weapons or violence. He had something better. He had the truth. And in 73 days, Donovan Merrick was going to learn that some enemies can't be bought, can't be threatened, and can't be stopped. Because they have nothing left to lose and everything worth fighting for. The sun rose fully now, painting the cabin in golden light. Ethan Cole stood at his window, coffee in hand, and watched the valley wake up. Let them come. He was ready. Sheriff Boone Caldwell's house sat on the outskirts of Pinewood, a modest ranch-style home with faded blue siding and a pickup truck in the driveway that had seen better decades. Ethan arrived at 6 a.m. sharp, the sky still gray with pre-dawn light. He'd left Titan at the cabin sleeping soundly under the influence of pain medication with a note on the table. Stay, buddy. Back soon. Caldwell opened the door before Ethan could knock. He was 58, heavyset, with a face that carried the weight of too many compromises. His uniform shirt was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot like he hadn't slept. Behind him, the house had the worn quality of a man living alone, dishes in the sink, newspapers stacked on the coffee table, a photo on the mantel showing a younger Caldwell with a woman and a teenage boy, the frame dusty from neglect. Thanks for coming, Mr. Cole, Caldwell said, his voice rough. Coffee's on. They sat at the kitchen table. Caldwell poured 2 cups with hands that weren't quite steady, then sat heavily in a chair that creaked under his weight. I'm going to be straight with you, Caldwell said, staring into his coffee like it held answers he was afraid to find. I've been taking money from Donovan Merrick for 3 years, $2,000 a month cash delivered in an envelope to my home. My job was simple, look the other way. File reports that go nowhere. Make sure investigations don't happen. Delay responses to certain addresses when calls come in. Ethan said nothing, just listened, his coffee growing cold between his hands. My son deployed to Afghanistan last year. Marines, second tour. He writes me letters. Caldwell's voice cracked. Tells me about the villages they're protecting, the people they're helping, the difference they're making. And here I am, his father, taking bribes from a man who terrorizes my own town. From a man who has people beaten, who has animals killed, who destroys lives for profit. He pulled a USB drive from his pocket with shaking fingers, set it on the table between them like it was something that might explode. 6 months ago, I started recording my phone calls with Merrick. Every threat he made, every instruction he gave, every time he told me to ignore a crime or delay an investigation. I couldn't do anything with the recordings myself. If I went to the state police, Merrick would know. He's got people everywhere, county commissioners, judges, lawyers. But you, Caldwell pushed the drive toward Ethan. You're not part of the system. You're not compromised. You can use this. Why now? Ethan asked quietly. Because last night, Donovan Merrick called me at 1:30 in the morning. Told me 4 men were going to your cabin. Told me that no matter what calls came in from that area, I was to delay response by at least 2 hours. Make sure you had time to think about your situation, he said. Caldwell looked up, his eyes wet. When I heard about what Quinn did to Titan, about what they did to a military service dog who saved American lives, I thought about my son, about what he'd think of me if he knew what I'd become. And I decided I was done. Ethan picked up the USB drive. What's on here? Everything. 3 years of evidence, Merrick ordering property damage, Merrick arranging accidents, Merrick bribing county officials, names, dates, amounts, instructions to falsify inspection reports, plans to contaminate wells, orders to poison animals. He paused, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. And one conversation where he discusses killing someone if they don't sell. He didn't use those exact words, but the intent was clear. It's all there. This is enough to bring him down. Maybe. But recordings alone aren't always enough. Good lawyers can challenge them. Call them out of context. We need more. We need witnesses willing to testify, people who will stand up in court and tell the truth about what the Merricks have done. Caldwell stood, walked to the window, looked out at the rising sun. And there's something else you need to know. Merrick has a deadline, 73 days from today, some kind of investor meeting. If he doesn't have all the land by then, including yours, the whole Alpine Summit project collapses. He'll lose $40 million in deposits and loans. Everything he has. I know, Ethan said. Caldwell turned back surprised. You know, Garrett Hayes gave me documentation, financial projections, construction timelines, the whole playbook. Something like relief crossed Caldwell's face. Then you understand. You understand that Merrick is desperate now. That desperate men are dangerous. That he'll do anything, and I mean anything, to get your land. I understand. There's one more thing. Caldwell walked to a cabinet, pulled out a card. I contacted an FBI agent in Denver 2 weeks ago. Her name is Meredith Kane. She specializes in public corruption and organized crime. I told her I might have information about a case in Wyoming. She's interested, but she needs something solid. Multiple witnesses, clear evidence. The kind of case that can survive expensive lawyers and political pressure. He handed the card to Ethan. Special Agent Meredith Kane, FBI, Denver Field Office. Can you get her here? Ethan asked. She'll come if we can show her we have a real case. Right now, all we have are pieces. You need to put them together. You need to convince the victims to come forward, to stand together. Caldwell's voice hardened with something like hope. And you need to do it fast. Because every day that passes is another day Merrick gets more desperate. Ethan left Caldwell's house as the sun broke over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. He had 3 USB drives now. Garrett's documentation, Caldwell's recordings, and Walter's handwritten notes. 3 different perspectives on the same criminal enterprise. The pieces were coming together. At noon, he met Garrett at the gun shop. Inside, Garrett had transformed his workbench into a command center, printed documents spread across the surface, photos pinned to a corkboard, a timeline written on poster board in neat military script. It looked like something from a war room, which Ethan supposed it was. I've been tracking Merrick's land acquisitions, Garrett said, pointing to a large map spread across the center of the bench. Red X's marked each property Merrick had purchased over the past 4 years. 58 marks in total, forming a rough oval around a central point. That's your land, Garrett said, tapping the center with his finger. Everything Merrick bought surrounds it. You're the keystone. Without your property, the resort plan has a hole right in the middle of the development. The ski slopes can't connect. The access roads don't work. The whole architectural design falls apart. So he needs me to sell. He needs you to sell, or he needs you gone. Garrett met Ethan's eyes. And in the next 73 days, as that deadline gets closer, things are going to get worse. Much worse. They spent 3 hours cross-referencing Garrett's documentation with Caldwell's recordings. The picture that emerged was methodical and damning. Donovan Merrick hadn't just bought land, he'd orchestrated a campaign of systematic terror. Property damage carefully timed to precede offers. Animals poisoned to break people's will. Wells contaminated. Barns burned. And in 2 cases, suspicious deaths that had been ruled accidents but looked very different when examined alongside the pattern. This is enough, Ethan said, looking at the evidence spread before them. This is more than enough to put him in prison. Maybe, if we can get people to testify. Garrett leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. But Cole, these people are terrified. They've been scared for years. They've watched their neighbors get destroyed. Seen what happens when you stand up to the Merricks. You're going to have to give them a reason to be brave. What kind of reason? Show them they're not alone. Show them that together they have power. Show them that you won't back down no matter what. Garrett paused. And you need to be ready for the cost. Because when you stand up, you become the target. Everything they've done to others, they'll do to you. Only worse. I know. Do you? Garrett's voice was sharp. Because I've been where you are, I thought I could fight them alone. Thought my money and my lawyers would be enough. But they're patient. They're methodical. They don't give up. He gestured to his hearing aids. These aren't from combat coal. These are from a construction accident 6 months ago. Explosion at a work site I was visiting. Officially faulty wiring. But the timing was interesting 3 days after I increased my offer to help other landowners fight back. Ethan felt ice in his stomach. They tried to kill you. They tried to send a message. The message was back off or next time we won't miss. Garrett smiled without humor. I didn't back off, but I got smarter, started building this case, started documenting everything, started looking for someone who could actually finish what I started. He met Ethan's eyes. That's you. You're not compromised, you're not afraid, and you've got skills most people don't have. So the question is, are you ready for what comes next? Ethan thought about Titan recovering at the cabin, thought about the promise he'd made to himself when he left the SEALs. No more violence, no more war, No more being the weapon the Navy had forged him into. But there were different kinds of war, different kinds of weapons. I'm ready, Audie said. At 3 p.m. Ethan met Owen Martinez in the high school parking lot. The kid was waiting beside a rusted Honda Civic backpack slung over one shoulder, looking around nervously like he expected Quinn Merrick to appear at any moment. Mr. Cole, Owen said as Ethan approached. Thanks for meeting me. Your mom said you have information. Owen pulled out his phone with trembling hands. I know things. Things the other kids see but don't talk about because we're scared. But after what they did to Titan, after what they've done to everyone, his voice hardened. I'm tired of being scared. He showed Ethan his phone. Photos and videos, dozens of them. Quinn Merrick exchanging pills for cash in the school parking lot. Text messages, arranging drug deals using barely coded language that was obvious in context. Screenshots of Venmo payments with emoji references to party supplies and good times. Quinn sells drugs at school, Owen said. Not hard stuff mostly. Oxy, Adderall, Xanax. Pills he gets from somewhere. Kids think his dad has connections with a pharmacy in Cheyenne. He's been doing it for 2 years. Everyone knows. But the principal won't do anything because Donovan Merrick donated money for the new gym, because Quinn's dad is important. Ethan scrolled through the evidence. It was careless, arrogant, the behavior of someone who'd never faced real consequences. Why show me this? Ethan asked. Owen looked away, his jaw tight. Because you stood up to him. Because you didn't bend when they hurt Titan. Because his voice broke. When they beat me up last year, my mom wanted to fight. Wanted to go to the police, hire a lawyer, make them pay. But I told her not to. I was scared of what they'd do to her, to our business, to us. And now I hate myself for it. I hate that I let fear win. He looked back at Ethan, tears in his eyes now. So if you're planning something, if you're going to take them down, I want to help. I have all these files backed up. I can testify. I can get other kids to testify. We're tired of being afraid, Mr. Cole. We just need someone to show us it's possible to fight back. Ethan studied this 17-year-old kid carrying guilt he shouldn't have to carry, offering to face down the people who'd broken his jaw because he wanted to believe courage was possible. Can you send me those files? Ethan asked. Yes, sir, right now. And Owen, Ethan waited until the kid met his eyes. What happened to you wasn't your fault. You were protecting your mom. That's not cowardice. That's love. Don't carry shame for doing the right thing in an impossible situation. Owen's face crumpled. He nodded quickly, wiped his eyes, then pulled out his phone and started transferring files. By evening, Ethan had assembled a clearer picture than he'd thought possible. 3 USB drives of evidence. Owen's phone data. Walter's year of documentation. A network of victims who'd stayed silent because they thought they were alone. But they weren't alone. Not anymore. He made calls, sent texts. By 8 p.m., he'd contacted 17 people, everyone he could identify from Garrett's files as Merrick victims. The message was simple: meeting tomorrow night, Reverend Luther Grant's church, 7 p.m. Come if you want to fight back. He expected maybe 5 people to show up. At 7 p.m. the next evening, when Ethan arrived at the small Baptist church on the edge of town, 23 people were waiting. More than he'd contacted. Word had spread. Walter Brennan was there sitting in a front pew. Stella Martinez with Owen beside her. A rancher named Thompson who'd lost his barn to fire. A widow named Patterson whose husband had died in that mysterious car accident. Catherine Walsh, the veterinarian. A dozen others, people whose names Ethan didn't know, but whose stories were written in their tired faces and nervous hands. Reverend Luther Grant stood at the front of the room. He was 51 with silver-streaked dark hair and a voice that carried natural authority. When everyone had settled, he raised his hands for quiet. Thank you all for coming, Grant said, his deep voice filling the small space. We're here because we're tired of being afraid, because we've watched our neighbors suffer and done nothing, because we've let evil flourish in our community while we stayed silent. He gestured to Ethan. Mr. Cole has something to say. Ethan stood. He wasn't comfortable speaking to groups, never had been. Public speaking wasn't part of SEAL training, but leadership was. And sometimes leadership meant standing in front of scared people and showing them that hope was possible. My name is Ethan Cole, he said, his voice quiet but steady. 2 days ago, Quinn Merrick kicked my dog. That dog's name is Titan. He's a veteran military K-9 who saved 18 lives in Iraq by detecting explosives. Right now, he's home recovering from surgery. Surgery that cost $4,000 I didn't have. Surgery that Walter Brennan paid for with money from his VA disability claim. He looked at Walter. The old man nodded, his eyes wet. I came to Wyoming to find peace, Ethan continued, to get away from violence and war. But the Merricks won't allow peace. They want my land, and they'll hurt anyone and anything to get it. I could sell, I could take their money and leave, start over somewhere else. But if I do that, who's next? Whose dog dies next? Whose son gets beaten next? Whose husband gets run off the road? The room was silent except for the sound of people breathing. I have evidence, Ethan said. Recordings of Donovan Merrick ordering crimes, documents showing financial fraud, photos of property damage, testimony about drug dealing, 3 years of documentation from multiple sources, enough to bring the Merricks to trial. But evidence alone isn't enough. The FBI needs witnesses, people willing to stand up in court and tell the truth about what happened to them. They'll destroy us, someone said from the back, a woman in her 60s with fear in her voice. They have lawyers, money, connections. They'll drag us through courts for years, bankrupt us, ruin us. Maybe, Ethan said, but they can't destroy all of us. Not if we stand together, not if we refuse to be silent anymore. Easy for you to say. The rancher Thompson spoke up, his voice bitter. You're a Navy SEAL. You're trained for this. We're just regular people trying to survive. So am I, Ethan said quietly. I fix fences for $20 an hour. I chop wood. I drink coffee at Stella's Cafe and try to make my disability check last the month. The only difference between me and you is that I've seen what happens when good people stay silent. I've watched entire communities fall apart because everyone was waiting for someone else to be brave first. I've stood at funerals for men who died because the people who could have helped were too afraid to act. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I'm not asking you to fight. I'm not asking you to put yourselves in danger. I'm just asking you to tell the truth. To say out loud what happened to you. To let the FBI and the courts and the world know that the Merricks aren't successful businessmen. They're criminals who've gotten away with terror for 4 years. He pulled out a folder. Inside were printed statements, everything he'd gathered from various sources. The FBI is interested, he said. Special Agent Meredith Kane in Denver. But she needs a case she can win. She needs witnesses. People willing to go on record. I can't force anyone to do that. But I'm asking, if the Merricks hurt you, if you've seen crimes and stayed quiet, now is the time to speak. No one moved. The silence stretched. Ethan felt his hope beginning to crack. Maybe Garrett was right. Maybe fear was too strong. Maybe Walter Brennan stood. They killed my dog, Duke, he said, his voice shaking but clear. Poisoned him because I wouldn't sell my land. I sold anyway because I was a coward. But I'm done being a coward. I'll testify. Stella stood next. They beat my son Owen, broke his jaw, made me pay protection money. I'll testify. Owen stood beside his mother. I have evidence of drug dealing, photos, text messages. I'll testify. One by one, people rose. Not everyone, some left quietly, fear still stronger than anger. But of the 23 who'd come, 17 stayed standing. It was enough. It was more than enough. They talked for 2 hours, shared stories, compared notes. The pattern became even clearer. Donovan Merrick and his son had terrorized the valley systematically for years, and they'd gotten away with it because they'd isolated their victims, made each one think they were alone, made resistance seem impossible. But the victims weren't alone anymore. Not after tonight. When the meeting ended, Reverend Grant pulled Ethan aside. I need to tell you something, Grant said quietly. I've been taking Merrick's money for 3 years. $50,000 a year donated to the church. I told myself it was for a good cause, that I could do more good with the money than without it, that feeding the hungry and helping the poor mattered more than where the money came from. He looked physically ill, but blood money doesn't build anything holy. It corrupts everything it touches. I've been preaching about courage and faith while taking bribes to stay silent about evil in my own community. Grant met Ethan's eyes. I'm done. I'll testify too. I'll tell them about the money, the pressure to stay quiet, everything. Even if it means the church loses funding, even if it costs me my position. That's going to be expensive, Ethan said. Good things usually are. Grant managed a small smile. Besides, I'd rather stand before God having done the right thing too late than never having done it at all. Ethan drove home in darkness, exhausted but energized. He had witnesses now, had evidence, had momentum. Sheriff Caldwell was reaching out to the FBI. The pieces were coming together faster than he'd dared hope. But Merrick wasn't going to sit idle while they built a case against him. Garrett's warning echoed in his mind. As the deadline gets closer, things are going to get worse, much worse. The thought had barely formed when Ethan crested the hill leading to his cabin and saw lights. Too many lights. Vehicle headlights, flashlights sweeping across his property, dark shapes moving. His cabin was under siege. Ethan stopped the truck a quarter-mile away, cut the engine, assessed. 4 vehicles he could see, possibly more hidden. 8 to 10 people moving around his property. Too many for intimidation. This was something else. His phone rang, unknown number. Mr. Cole, this is Special Agent Meredith Kane, FBI Denver Field Office. Sheriff Caldwell gave me your number. I need to ask you a very important question. Are you at your cabin right now? No, but someone else is. Multiple vehicles, at least 8 people. Jesus. A pause, then her voice came back harder, more urgent. Listen to me carefully. Do not go home. Do not approach your property. We're tracking credible threats against you and several of your witnesses. I'm in my car right now, 3 hours from Pinewood. Can you get to town, to the sheriff's station? 20 minutes. Go there now. Caldwell's expecting you. We're initiating an emergency response. This situation just became federal. Ethan turned the truck around, his mind racing. As he drove, he called Garrett. They're at my cabin, Ethan said without preamble. Titan. Titan's safe. I took him to Dr. Walsh's clinic this morning. Told her I had a bad feeling. It was the truth. After the attack 2 nights ago, Ethan had decided Titan was safer at the clinic until this was resolved. But Garrett, if they're willing to raid my property, they're willing to target the others. We need to protect the witnesses. Where are you going? Sheriff's Station. FBI's coming tonight. Can you spread the word? Tell everyone to stay somewhere public? Somewhere with other people. Don't be alone. I'm on it. Cole, be careful. If Merrick knows about the meeting tonight, if he knows what we're planning, he's going to try to stop it before the FBI can act. I know. The Pinewood Sheriff's Station was a small brick building on Main Street, looking exactly like what it was, a 3-person department in a town of 800. Caldwell was waiting outside when Ethan arrived. With him were 2 people Ethan didn't recognize. The woman was in her 40s, athletic build, dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore jeans and a jacket, but something about her posture screamed federal agent. The man beside her was younger Latino, also in civilian clothes, but with the same unmistakable bearing. Mr. Cole, the woman said, extending her hand. Special Agent Meredith Kane, FBI. This is Agent Torres. We were already in Wyoming on another case when Sheriff Caldwell contacted us. We drove straight here. They shook hands. Kane's grip was firm, professional, assessing. We've been monitoring the Merrick family for 8 months, Kane said without preamble. Public corruption, racketeering. We suspected worse but couldn't prove it. The recordings Sheriff Caldwell provided changed that. We now have probable cause for multiple federal charges. How fast can you move? Ethan asked. We can have warrants by morning, but we need your witnesses secured first. If Merrick realizes what's happening, he'll either flee or eliminate evidence. Or worse. Worse, Kane's expression darkened. Mr. Cole, there are 4 other cases in Wyoming and Montana similar to this one over the past decade. Wealthy developers using intimidation to acquire land. In 2 of those cases, key witnesses died before trial. Car accidents, house fires. One was ruled a suicide, though the family disputes that. We can't prove the deaths were connected to the cases, but the pattern is deeply concerning. The ice in Ethan's stomach solidified into something harder. You think Merrick would kill witnesses? I think a man facing financial ruin and federal prison is capable of anything. Donovan Merrick has $40 million in loans coming due. If Alpine Summit fails, he loses everything: his company, his properties, his reputation. Men in that position don't think rationally. They think desperately. They moved inside. Kane spread out a map on Caldwell's desk, the same valley map Garrett had shown Ethan, but with additional markings. This is what we know, Kane said, pointing to various locations. Merrick Development has borrowed heavily against future profits from Alpine Summit. The company's current debt exceeds $60 million. Donovan Merrick personally guaranteed these loans. If the project fails, he doesn't just lose the business. He goes bankrupt. Maybe faces charges for fraudulent loan applications. How much time does he have? Ethan asked, though he already knew. According to the documents, Sheriff Caldwell provided 72 days until his investors require proof that all land has been acquired. If he can't deliver, they pull out. The whole project collapses. She looked at Ethan. Your property is the last piece. Without it, he has nothing. Which means for the next 72 days, you are the most dangerous person to his future. Do you understand what that means? It means he'll try to force me out or make me disappear. Exactly. Kane's voice was sharp. Which is why when we move on Merrick tomorrow, you need to understand what you're stepping into. He'll know the case came from you. He'll know you organized the witnesses. You become the focal point of his anger and desperation. Are you prepared for that? Ethan thought about Titan recovering at the vet clinic, thought about Walter and Stella and Owen, and all the others who'd found the courage to stand up. Thought about the choice between running and fighting, between peace and justice. Yes, he said, I'm prepared. Kane studied him for a long moment, then nodded. All right, here's how this works. She laid out the plan. FBI agents were already en route to Pinewood 12 in total, arriving throughout the night. By dawn, they'd have enough personnel to conduct simultaneous raids on Merrick Development Headquarters, Donovan's mansion, and Quinn's apartment in Jackson. They'd seize documents, computers, financial records. Arrest both Merricks on federal charges ranging from racketeering to witness intimidation. But first, they needed to secure the witnesses. Ethan pulled out his phone, started making calls. Within an hour, they'd organized protective custody of assorted witnesses, staying in groups, never alone, rotating between the church, Garrett's house, and the cafe. Always in public spaces, always with multiple people present. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. At midnight, Ethan's phone rang, Garrett's number. Cole Owen Martinez is missing. The world stopped. What? Stella just called me, panicking. Owen went to his locker at school after our meeting to get his laptop, said he'd forgotten it. That was 2 hours ago. His truck's still in the school parking lot, but he's gone. Phone's off, no sign of him. Ethan felt his blood turn to ice. Someone took him. That's what I'm thinking. And Cole? Garrett's voice was tight. There's a note on Stella's cafe door, left in the last hour. It says, trade. The boy for the land, Old Merrick Warehouse on Industrial Road. Midnight. Come alone, or he dies. Ethan checked his watch. 12:14 a.m. I'm going, he said. The FBI, and they said, the FBI isn't here. Owen is 17 years old and he's in danger because he helped me. Ethan was already moving toward his truck. Call Kane. Tell her where I'm going, but I'm not waiting. He hung up before Garrett could argue, told Kane and Caldwell what had happened. Kane's face went pale. Mr. Cole, if you go in there alone, you're giving Merrick exactly what he wants. He has a kid who stood up because I asked him to. I'm not leaving him. Then let us come with you. We can have a team there in. There's no time. He said midnight. It's already past that. Ethan headed for the door. Call the warehouse. Surround it. But I'm going in now. He drove to his cabin first. Needed one thing. The thing he'd promised himself he wouldn't need again. Inside, he went straight to the bedroom closet. Pulled out the footlocker. Spun the combination. Inside, beneath the uniforms and medals and photos, was the oilcloth. He unwrapped it. His seal-issue Sig Sauer P. 226, cleaned and maintained despite 2 years of not carrying it. Old habits. He checked the magazine. 15 rounds, chambered 1, 16 total. Enough. He drove to the old Merrick Warehouse on Industrial Road, the same building where Quinn had partied. Now dark, silent. One vehicle in the lot, a black SUV Ethan recognized from the night 4 men had come to his cabin. He parked 50 yards away. Texted Garrett, I'm here. Tell Kane, tell her to hurry. Then he checked on Titan one more time. Not physically, the dog was safe at Dr. Walsh's clinic, but mentally. Remembered why he was doing this, who he was protecting. Ethan got out of the truck. The SIG was tucked in his waistband, covered by his jacket. He approached the warehouse on foot, every sense alert, training from a decade of operations flooding back. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open slowly. Inside, temporary lights had been set up, harsh and industrial. Owen sat in the center of the space, tied to a metal chair. His face was bruised, fresh blood at the corner of his mouth. But his eyes were alert, angry, scared but not broken. Behind Owen stood 3 figures. Quinn Merrick on the left, looking nervous out of his depth. A man Ethan didn't recognize on the right, mid-40s, built like a boxer, definitely hired muscle. And in the center, immaculate, in a 3-piece suit, despite the hour, Donovan Merrick. The former senator held a handgun. Ethan recognized it as a Beretta 92 FS, expensive. Well-maintained. Donovan didn't point it at anyone, just held it casually at his side like it was a prop. Mr. Cole, Donovan said, his voice carrying that warm politician's timbre. Thank you for coming. I was concerned you might involve the authorities. That would have been unfortunate for young Owen here. Ethan's eyes went to Owen. The kid was scared but trying to hide it. Their eyes met. Owen gave the smallest shake of his head. Don't give in. Let him go, Ethan said quietly. Of course, as soon as you sign this. Donovan gestured to papers on a nearby crate. Deed transfer. Your land to Merrick Development for $1. Very simple, very legal. You sign, the boy goes free, everyone moves on with their lives. And if I don't, Donovan's expression didn't change. The warm smile stayed in place, but something in his eyes went very cold. Then the boy pays the price for your stubbornness, just like your dog paid, just like everyone who crosses me pays eventually. Quinn shifted uncomfortably. Dad, this wasn't the plan. You said we just scare him. You said, shut up, Quinn. Donovan's voice remained pleasant, but the command was absolute. You've already caused enough problems with your carelessness. Let the adults handle this. He turned back to Ethan, raising the Beretta, now pointing it directly at Owen's head. I've spent 4 years building Alpine Summit, borrowed $40 million, staked my entire reputation and fortune on this project. I will not lose everything because one stubborn veteran thinks he's special. His finger moved to the trigger. Sign the papers, Mr. Cole, or I put a bullet in this boy's brain and we see if you're willing to let a child die for a piece of worthless land. Ethan assessed rapidly, 20 feet between him and Donovan. The Beretta already aimed at Owen. The hired muscle on the right probably armed. Quinn on the left, wild card. He couldn't draw and fire before Donovan pulled the trigger. Couldn't save Owen with speed alone, but he could buy time. Keep Donovan talking until the FBI arrived. You won't shoot, Ethan said. You're not a killer. You're a businessman who makes other people do the dirty work. Am I? Donovan smiled. Would you like to test that theory? Dad, Jesus. Quinn's voice was panicked now. This is insane. This is murder. This is survival. Donovan's mask cracked for the first time, rage flashing through. This is what it takes to win, to build something, to be someone. You've always been weak, Quinn. Just like your mother. Soft, unable to do what's necessary. But I'm not weak. I'm a Merrick, and Merricks don't lose. The hired muscle tensed. Quinn backed toward the wall. Owen sat perfectly still, eyes locked on Ethan. I'll sign, Ethan said. Just let him go first. Do you think I'm stupid? Donovan laughed. You sign, then he goes, not before. Ethan took a step forward. Then let me see the papers. 3 steps closer, Donovan tracked him with the gun, but didn't fire. Still confident, still in control. That's when Titan came through the door. Ethan hadn't brought him. Hadn't even known the dog was nearby, but Dr. Walsh's clinic was only 2 miles away. And Titan, despite his injuries, despite the surgery, despite everything, must have sensed his handler was in danger. Must have somehow gotten out. Must have tracked Ethan here. The dog didn't bark, didn't give warning. Just moved with the speed and precision of a warrior who'd spent 6 years in combat zones. 80 pounds of German Shepherd launching across 20 feet in less than 3 seconds. Donovan heard him at the last moment. Turned, fired. The shot went wide, hitting the wall. The report was deafening in the enclosed space. Titan hit Donovan chest high, driving the older man backward. The Beretta clattered across the concrete floor. Donovan screamed, genuine terror in his voice. Ethan was already moving, crossed the distance to Quinn in 2 strides. The younger Merrick tried to run. Ethan grabbed his collar, spun him, drove him face first into the wall with controlled force, hard enough to stun, not hard enough to cause serious injury. Quinn dropped, nose-bleeding, consciousness flickering. The hired muscle reached for a gun. Ethan drew the SIG and aimed it at center mass. Don't, Ethan said quietly. The man's hand stopped. After a moment, he raised both hands and stepped back. Ethan turned. Titan had Donovan pinned on the ground, jaws locked around the older man's wrist. Not biting down hard enough to break bone, just holding, waiting for the command. Good boy, Ethan said, his voice breaking. Good boy, Titan. You found me. He went to Owen, cut the ropes with a folding knife from his pocket. The kid was shaking but unharmed. Go outside, Ethan said. Your mom's coming. And the FBI. Owen stumbled toward the door, stopped, looked back at Titan. Will he be okay? Ethan looked at his dog. Titan was breathing hard, favoring his injured leg, clearly in pain. But his eyes were bright, alert, on duty. He's always okay, Ethan said. Now go. Owen ran. Ethan walked to where Donovan lay beneath Titan, the distinguished former senator, the respected businessman. Reduced to a terrified old man with a dog's jaws around his wrist, suit rumpled hair, disheveled mask completely shattered. You made a mistake, Ethan said quietly. What mistake? Donovan spat, trying to maintain some shred of dignity. You threatened my dog. You hurt him, and you thought that would make me weak. Make me bend. Ethan pulled out his phone, started recording. But all you did was show me what you really are. Not a powerful man, just a coward with money. Now, you're going to confess everything, every property, every threat, every crime, every person you've hurt, or I let Titan bite down. You're bluffing. You won't. Ethan looked at Titan. The dog's eyes shifted to Donovan's throat. Ready, waiting, a warrior who knew how to kill and would do it on command if necessary. Am I? Ethan asked. Donovan talked. For 7 minutes, he confessed everything. 58 properties acquired through intimidation, animals poisoned, wells contaminated, people threatened, bribes paid to county officials, names, dates, amounts, the arson at the Johnson barn, the contamination of the Martinez well, the accident that killed Patterson. All of it spilling out because a 61-year-old coward was more afraid of a fatigue than he was of prison. When he finished, Ethan stopped recording, looked down at the man who'd terrorized an entire valley. Thank you, he said simply. Then he called Kane. Agent Kane, I'm at the old Merrick warehouse on Industrial Road. I have Owen Martinez safe. I have Donovan and Quinn Merrick in custody. I have a hired enforcer who'll probably flip for a deal. And I have a recorded confession. You might want to hurry. She arrived 9 minutes later with 6 FBI vehicles' lights, blazing agents pouring out in tactical gear. They found Ethan sitting on a crate, Titan lying beside him, head on Ethan's knee. Donovan and Quinn both on the floor, hands zip-tied with industrial ties Ethan had found in a storage room. The hired muscle sitting against the wall, hands already raised in surrender. Kane looked at the scene, at Ethan, at Titan, at the blood on the dog's muzzle from where he'd grabbed Donovan's wrist. You're supposed to let us handle things, she said. I did. You're handling them now. Ethan stood slowly, careful not to disturb Titan. I've got a recorded confession on my phone. Full details of every crime. And a 17-year-old kid who can testify to kidnapping and attempted murder. Kane took the phone, listened to the recording. When she looked up, something in her expression had shifted from frustration to respect. Mr. Cole, you just handed me the cleanest federal case I've had in 5 years. Good. Ethan walked toward his truck, Titan limping beside him. Because I'm done. Whatever happens next is yours. Wait, Kane followed him outside. Your dog, he's hurt. Let me get an agent to drive you to the vet. I've got it, but thank you. He lifted Titan gently into the truck. The dog was exhausted, breathing heavy, clearly in pain. But when Ethan's hand rested on his head, Titan's tail thumped once against the seat. You saved me again, Ethan whispered. I don't know how many times that makes, but thank you, buddy, thank you. He drove to Dr. Walsh's clinic. Catherine was waiting. Garrett had called her, warned her Titan might be coming. She examined the dog quickly, efficiently. Stitches held, she said finally. No new damage to the surgical site, but his heart rate is elevated, blood pressure high. He's exhausted. She looked at Ethan with tired eyes. This dog just saved your life again, but he can't keep doing this. His body can't take much more. I know, Ethan said. It's over now. The fight's over. Is it? Ethan thought about the recorded confession. The FBI raid happening right now at Donovan's mansion. The 17 witnesses ready to testify. The USB drives full of evidence. Yes, he said. It's over. He sat with Titan through the night. The dog slept fitfully, occasionally whimpering in dreams that might have been memories of combat or tonight's fight. Ethan kept one hand on Titan's back, feeling the steady rise and fall of breathing. The sun rose over the mountains, painting the clinic walls in shades of gold. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Kane. Both Merricks in custody. Simultaneous raids successful. Seized 47 boxes of documents, 12 computers, extensive financial records. Multiple arrests of associates. This case is airtight. Thank you. Another text from Stella. Owen's home, safe. Thank you for saving my son. I'll never forget this. From Garrett, watching the news. FB, I arrested Donovan at his mansion. It's all over the local channels. You did it, Cole. You actually did it. From Walter, Duke can rest now. Thank you. Ethan set down his phone, looked at Titan. We did it, buddy, he whispered. It's over. You can rest now. Titan's eyes opened, met Ethan's. The dog's tail moved once, then he sighed and went back to sleep. Outside, Pinewood was waking up to a new reality. The stranglehold broken, the fear lifting. Justice slow and imperfect, but real, beginning to turn. And in a small veterinary clinic, a Navy SEAL and his war dog rested together, their fight finally finished, for now. Because there would be trials, complications, lawyers. But the hardest part, the standing up, the gathering of courage, the choice to fight, that was done. The rest was just paperwork. Ethan closed his eyes, hands still on Titan's back, and for the first time in 72 hours he slept. Not deeply, not peacefully, but he slept. Because sometimes winning isn't about perfect endings. It's about choosing to stand when standing seems impossible. It's about protecting what matters even when the cost is high. It's about being the person your dog thinks you are. And in that small clinic, as the sun climbed higher and the world kept turning, Ethan Cole had become exactly that. A warrior who'd found his war and won it the right way. Not with violence, but with truth. Continued in epilogue. 1,200 words. Done. 5 months passed. The federal courthouse in Cheyenne was packed the day of sentencing. Press filled the back rows. Victims sat in the gallery. Ethan chose a seat in the corner, Garrett beside him. Stella and Owen 2 rows ahead. Walter across the aisle wearing the suit he'd been married in 40 years ago. Titan wasn't there. Dogs weren't allowed in federal court. But Ethan felt his presence anyway. Judge Morrison read the verdict without emotion. Donovan Merrick, 18 years federal prison for racketeering, extortion witness, intimidation, attempted murder, and conspiracy. No possibility of parole before serving minimum of 15 years. Quinn Merrick, 8 years federal prison with possibility of parole after 5, followed by 5 years supervised release. Donovan's face showed nothing as they led him away in chains. But Quinn looked back once, found Ethan in the crowd, mouthed 2 words that might have been "I'm sorry," or might have been something else. Ethan nodded once. It didn't fix anything, but acknowledgement was something. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Ethan kept walking. He'd said everything he needed to say in his testimony 3 months ago. The rest was just noise. Agent Kane caught up with him in the parking lot. "Mr. Cole, wait." He turned. Kane looked tired but satisfied, the look of someone who'd won a fight that mattered. "I wanted to tell you the case is being used as a model now. Training material for public corruption investigations. Your testimony, the way you organize the witnesses, the evidence gathering, it's textbook." She paused. "The Bureau wants to know if you'd be interested in consulting work, teaching agents how to build community-based cases." Ethan considered it, shook his head. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm done with that life. I just want to go home." "I understand." Kane handed him her card anyway. "If you change your mind," and Cole, thank you for showing people that fighting back is possible, for proving that even entrenched corruption can be defeated if enough people find courage. He drove back to Pinewood as the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. The valley looked the same as when he'd first arrived 2 years ago, but it felt different, lighter, like a weight had been lifted. His cabin had been repaired while the trial was ongoing. New windows, new door, the damage erased, but Ethan had kept one thing: the torn photo of his grandfather taped back together and framed. A reminder that some things once broken never quite look the same, but they can still be whole. Titan was waiting on the porch when Ethan pulled up. The dog was 10 now, visibly older than 6 months ago. His muzzle had gone almost completely gray. His movements were slower, careful arthritis settling into joints that had carried him through too many battles. But his eyes were still bright, still watching, still protecting. "Hey, buddy," Ethan said, climbing out of the truck. "Miss me?" Titan's tail wagged. The dog stood slowly, painfully, and walked to Ethan, pressed against his leg. Behind the cabin, construction was ongoing. What had started as Ethan's small property had expanded with donations that poured in after the trial. Letters from veterans, checks from strangers who'd followed the story, support from organizations dedicated to retired military working dogs. The sign at the end of the new driveway read Pinewood, K9 Sanctuary, where warriors rest. 4 German shepherds played in the yard, all retired from service, all carrying injuries that had ended their careers, but not their spirits. Garrett was there helping install fencing. Catherine Walsh examined a new arrival. Stella brought lunch in containers from the cafe. The sanctuary had become something larger than Ethan had imagined. A place where broken warriors, both human and canine, could heal together. Walter visited daily, bringing treats he pretended not to give the Muzz. Owen came after school, helping with training and care, working off the guilt he still carried in the only way that seemed to help. Reverend Grant led a weekly prayer service, the church having survived losing Merrick's funding by discovering that community support was stronger than one corrupt donor. Even Sheriff Caldwell stopped by, sometimes having resigned his position, but found new purpose in volunteer work, trying to make amends one day at a time. The community had pulled together in ways that surprised everyone. The sanctuary became a gathering place, a symbol of what was possible when people chose courage over fear. But for Ethan, it was simpler than that. It was home, Finally, truly home. 3 months later, on a cold morning in early winter, Titan didn't get up. Ethan knew immediately. He'd seen death enough times to recognize it. The dog was still breathing, but his eyes had that faraway look, the peace that comes when the fight is finally completely over. Ethan carried him to the truck, drove to the meadow where elk still grazed in the mornings, spread a blanket under an oak tree, sat with Titan's head in his lap. "You were the best of us," Ethan said, his voice breaking. "The very best. Braver than me, better than me. You saved my life 17 times in Iraq. Saved it again here. I don't know how to do this without you, buddy. I don't know how to be the person you thought I was." Titan's tail moved. Once. Twice. His eyes found Ethan's. Held them. And in that look was everything. Forgiveness. Love. Trust. The absolute certainty that Ethan was exactly who Titan had always believed him to be. Then the dog closed his eyes, his breathing slowed. And quietly, without struggle, Titan let go. They buried him on the hill overlooking the sanctuary. Military honors, flag presentation. Garrett played taps on a battered trumpet he'd kept from his Navy days. 17 veterans attended the funeral, people Ethan had never met who'd driven hours to pay respects to a war dog who'd saved lives. The headstone was simple granite Titan military working dog, K9 2015 to 2025 43. IEDs detected. 18 American lives saved a warrior. Until the end. That night, Ethan stood on his porch looking at the hill where Titan rested. The sanctuary was quiet behind him. Dogs sleeping, stars overhead, the valley at peace. He thought about everything that had led here. The fight with the Merricks, the choice between running and standing, the people who'd found courage they didn't know they had. Titan had made that choice every day of his service. Stand, protect, serve. No matter the cost, Ethan pulled out his phone, made a video he'd been planning since the day Titan died. "My name is Ethan Cole," he said to the camera. "A year ago, someone kicked my dog. That dog was Titan, a Navy K9 who'd saved 18 lives in Iraq. What happened next changed my life and my town." He talked for 15 minutes. About Titan, about the fight, about the sanctuary, about why it mattered. "People ask me if we're even now," he said. "Titan saved my life 17 times in combat. I saved his twice here, but we're not even. Because love doesn't keep score. Loyalty doesn't have limits. Faith doesn't end when the fight gets hard." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "My grandfather used to say God gives us dogs to teach us how to love unconditionally, and he gives us land to teach us what's worth fighting for. I fought for this land not because it's valuable. I fought because it's home, and home isn't a place. It's who you protect, who protects you. Titan taught me that. So did the people of Pinewood. We weren't strong alone, but together we were unbreakable. That's faith, not in ourselves, but in each other, and in the God who puts the right people and the right dogs in our path when we need them most. If you're facing something that seems impossible, if you're scared, if you think you're alone, you're not. Stand up, speak truth, find your community, fight for what's right, not because it's easy, because it's necessary." He ended the recording, posted it with a simple caption, "In memory of Titan, 2015 to 2025, a warrior who taught me what courage really means." The video went viral. Within 2 weeks, 5 million views. Donations flooded the sanctuary enough to expand to help dozens more retired war dogs to build something that would last long after Ethan was gone. 6 months later, text appeared on screens across America. Titan K9 military working dog, passed peacefully in 2025 at age 10, buried with full military honors on land. He helped protect Pinewood K9 Sanctuary, has provided care for 89 retired military working dogs, expanded to 3 locations across Wyoming, funded entirely by donations from the community. Titan helped save Donovan Merrick, serving 18 years at FCY Englewood. Colorado earliest possible release 2041. Quinn Merrick released on parole in 2032. Now volunteers at Rocky Mountain Animal Rescue, working to make amends. Ethan Cole continues to run Pinewood K9 Sanctuary. His testimony before Congress in 2026 led to the MWD Retirement Act, providing lifetime V, a health care for all retired military working dogs. The people of Pinewood rebuilt their community on foundations of courage instead of fear. Property values recovered. New businesses opened. The Merrick Development Building was converted into a community center. If you know a veteran or retired K9 who needs help, visit pinewoodk9sanctuary.org. What would you fight for? God bless you all. Ethan stood at Titan's grave on the 1-year anniversary. Behind him, the sanctuary hummed with life. Dogs barking, Volunteers laughing, the sound of healing. He knelt, placed his hand on the cold granite. "We did it, buddy," he whispered. "The sanctuary's helping dogs you never met, saving lives you'll never see. Your legacy is bigger than either of us ever imagined." The wind moved through the pine trees. Somewhere down the hill, a dog barked. Another answered. Ethan smiled. Because Titan had taught him one final lesson: that courage isn't something you have. It's something you choose. Every day, every moment, every time fear says run and you decide to stand instead. And sometimes when you choose courage, you don't just save yourself. You save everyone around you. You change your community. You build something that lasts. Ethan stood, looked out over the valley, his home. "Thank you, Titan," he said quietly, "for everything. For showing me what loyalty means. For teaching me that peace is worth fighting for. For being a better warrior than I ever was." He walked back down the hill. Work was waiting, dogs needed feeding, fences needed mending. Life continued. But for just a moment, Ethan could have sworn he felt something warm breath on his hand, the press of a furry shoulder against his leg, the weight of absolute trust that only a dog can give. And he knew with certainty that required no proof that somewhere beyond the mountains and the stars, an old German shepherd with a graying muzzle was watching. Still on duty, still protecting, still faithful, forever.